What happened to those sites where Salim Ali worked 75 years back? Yes, that was mooted. And then we will have to remember the great forest officer, T.M. Manoharan. He was the chief wildlife warden, and he agreed to that. And he asked people, who will do that? Who are the people who will do it very consistently, and who is having that such credibility? There are many people around. There are more bird watchers than birds around. That we used to, even, that was actually coined by Neelakandan sir. He used to say, there are more bird watchers than birds in Kerala now. Okay, so there are many bird watchers whom we will select. Then we suggested that sir should be led by, the team should be led by Shashi Kumar. Yes, that agreed. And who should be the 10 members? One was Vishnu Das, and the other one was Vinayan also. So that was decided, and they started their work exactly after 75 years, January 3rd from Marayur, and they went through the trail where Salim Ali stayed, and what. So after that, there is a publication. I don't know how many of you have seen that. That's a fantastic publication, and they finished the work in 1 year, and that is how I think Krishnadas came into a full-time bird watching profession, or what is career. After that, it was his career also. Actually, he was working in some other organization, and with great pain, he resigned that to join this team. Then we were asking whether you can resign it and join, or how to go back. No, there is no going back. I can resign and come. There is okay. No, there is no problem. So that is Vishnudas, and he proved that also afterwards what he did. So Vishnudas is a conservation ecologist with 20 years experience in ecological research with the birds as subject in the Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, and Central India. His works include the description of 2 new genera. That paper yesterday, Pramod was also showing that paper, no? two genera of songbirds from India, that is actually from South India. The main interests are in ecology, evolution, biogeography, climate change, and with a special focus on threatened ecosystem, such as the sky islands and all. He is currently the director of the non-profit research organization, Hume Center of Ecology and Wildlife Biology, based in Wayanad. That is what given here. Okay. Profit, non-profit making, you may be making a lot of loss-making organization, we will call it. Okay, so we will hear from Vishnu Das himself. Maybe he will be talking for about half an hour. Then immediately after that, after the presentation of each speaker, we will have the question and answer session. Otherwise, we will forget. Okay, so maybe 10-15 minutes we can spend for that. So he will be making the present, where you are going to present here. So, okay. Okay, you can take 30 minutes, up to 40 minutes you can have.
Thank you, sir.
Then the discussion. Okay. You want this mic also?
Yeah, this is fine. I'll check. Visible now? Outside? Hello. Good morning, everyone. This is before the presentation. I was wondering whether Kunyushan sir will come for this first or not. And thanks to the whole South African incidents that brought you here for the function. When I thought for a chair for the session, we thought about biogeography. The first name was in my mind was you, but you said that I am going to Tanzania. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and you're here to chair this. Very happy to see. So I'm going to present that presentation as everybody knows about it, like we did the work on birds in the mountains almost 10-15 years now. Just to set the theme, when we look at birds from a scientific perspective, we have different streams, like looking at yesterday we talked about history, and today we are moving a little bit more about the evolution, how they evolved. And here comes the biogeography as an element, like how the continents and the past climate change that shaped the current bird population or any organisms which has been diversified across time and space across the globe. So maybe for a long time, Indian subcontinent was that not well studied, especially when you're talking about birds. And our study that we did along with Robin, I was actually want Robin to present this, but he was not available, so I'm standing here now. My interest, I would say, in birds of this mountain started when we did work on the Salimalis Trail and across the mountains of Kerala. And that is the time I found like these species are quite different across the mountains. And they were looking into the deeper into the natural history of British time. Always there is a lumping and splitting going on. And that time I had discussion with Robin and those Uma at that time. We thought about this biology, especially the gaps in the mountain region. So this work started in I think 2010 from NCBS with many multiple colleagues joining, and I have my friends now in scholars in different institutes like Jobin, Ansha, all are back here as presenters today. Looking the research taking much more in a wider shape in the whole of Indian subcontinent in multiple ways. So that is brings some lot of happiness into that. I am going to look at this, even if you're looking at the biogeography, as everyone knows, is the study that geographic distribution of organisms considering both biotic and abiotic factors. That's basically how we define biogeography, like how, and is well established by by the Wallace and Darwin's work in the early period. Basically, getting the whole idea of evolution, the theory of natural selection, has come out from the observation of geographical distribution of animals across the maybe say continents or islands. So the advantage of Wallace that got much easy to get into this understanding of speciation was mostly because the islands are much more closer, and he could identify species variability in different mountains, different islands which are very close in the Southeast Asian countries. Equally, the Darwin's looking at the species even in an island perspective, which is again visible changes across the island. So naturally, the process of observation has turned into a theory of natural selection. And beyond that, now we have a very after that, maybe the establishment of biogeography as a science has grown much beyond the imagination. Like now everybody is looking from a biogeographical perspective. And it is important that these biogeographical zones are in many cases, they are the only available habitat for many species. For example, when you're talking about the Banasura chelappan that we have recently declared as a district bird, it is confined only into 3 isolated mountains in Wayanad, nowhere else in the world. So the habitat is very important. So the idea of talking about biogeography comes in like how we can understand the importance of these isolated mountain tops which are acting as islands, and islands are the most sensitive. When you talk about dodo and many other island species has gone extinction, and maybe I don't know how long these people will survive in the mountains. So climate change plays a major role in that. Maybe the past climate change shaped this species. Now we are in another time of history that we are in a time where we are facing the human-induced climate change, where every nook and corner we are experiencing extreme weather events in cyclones and floods and extreme precipitation. And it is important to look on the landscape, how this is going to impact on the species that we are concerned about it. So basically, when you look at biogeography on bird studies, it's basically looking at distribution of birds influenced by barriers such as mountains or gaps which affect the dispersal and evolutionary history and migration pattern. So all these are concepts when you're talking about largely about the bird biogeography. And looking at the case of, I am going to talk about the Western Ghats, that how the Montesingla group or the Laughing Thrush group are split across time. How the Western Ghats topography, which has influence. Well, for this map, you can see that we have the southern Western Ghats has the highest number of peaks that are going beyond 1,200 meters, with significant gaps in between the whole terrain. So these gaps, as we see from a biogeographic perspective, you see the habitat between the islands, which are of lower elevation. Many of these are not suitable for certain species to live upon. So that becomes a barrier for species to move in between from one mountain top into the another mountain. So over a period of time, historical time, the population get isolated in different mountain tops, and they got into some kind of morphological and molecular, genetical changes that actually come into establishment of a new species that what we see now. So this is like a human perspective of defining a species. That's also we have to see. Like we are defining a species. For a bird, I don't know how much that relevant. Humans are describing. Okay, this is a species based on the earlier we were describing based on the morphological characters. Like okay, this looks white here, or something look a long eyebrow, and this don't have a long eyebrow, or you have other colors on back side and front side. So there are some other features, beaks and foraging habitats. So time has changed when the invent of molecular science. Now looking molecular, we are looking more deeper into the genomics and the genetic structure of the species. That okay, maybe some kind of sometimes you will see species look similar, but genetically they are different. So the description of species identification itself has changed over a period of time. Now looking at from the molecular science angle. So at this point of time, we are talking about now these are 4 different species which are genetically isolated and staying in different mountain tops. So what happened is like the climate change that happened in the maybe about 11 million years before, the whole of Indian subcontinent was much more hospitable for the ancient bird species, especially the parental birds, which has appeared some maybe 11 million years before across the whole of Indian subcontinent, has been maybe spread across the landscape. But later on, the habitat and the climatic condition changed. The central India become much more drier. Then the hospitable habitat has shrunk mostly into the southern mountains. That's the whole story of isolation that happened with the past climate change. So when you look at the earlier bird which was separated from Himalayas, and some group has gone into the southern western or western Ghats side for millions of years, and they have acquired certain characteristics which are different from the other species over a period of time. So this works on and on for a long period of time. Now what we see in maybe we are standing in 2025, looking at the species and the landscape itself, you will see certain things are changing. And from a larger perspective of scale of thinking, like looking at a larger time frame, this species can also change and some can also go for extinction. So at this point of time, what we're looking at the past, like how the species has evolved in the Western Ghats is like, how these valleys have shaped the speciation is very interesting to look at. Like earlier we were thinking like, okay, these are some more close to the Garrulax laughing thrushes that we are talking about, mostly the Wayanad laughing thrush group. That was the original idea when the British has described the species. It was put in that group. And later someone else has came and they looked at, okay, this not fit here, you can change into something else. And yesterday, Pramod was talking about, Pamela came in between. She looked at from the museum specimen, looked at, okay, this is not fit here, so we can coin a new genus name like the Strophus incla. And that time we had a discussion, I was discussing Pamela because still working on morphology based on museum specimens, so why can't we looking at the genetics of that side? Maybe I am sure that this is going to be an entirely different genus at that time. But it took some time to have a discussion on that and start a project and working with multiple people together. And we're looking at from a molecular perspective, this turned out to be an entirely different genus that is, diverged from the parental birds some 11 million years before, from Himalayas and came into Western Ghats. And these valleys, especially the Palghat valleys, Palghat Gap and the Shankota Gap, and the Chalia Gap in between the Nilgiris and the Wayanad, that separated this whole group of birds into 4 different unique species that we call now. And that was a surprise that we never thought that this closest relative will be the Cibias and Millas in Himalayas. That's the very part. So this actually called for a unique description of the genus which is separated over a period of time to have a Western Ghats. That's what we call like endemic radiation when in an islands. When you're looking at the Western Ghats, very interesting finding that came out. But even I was not sure at that time, like whether it turned out to be a different genus altogether. So I think that our mountains are treasure troves of speciation, not only for birds, for other organisms also. There are studies on frogs and many other organisms, dragonflies are coming up now, how the topography and the climate that influence speciation in this part of Earth. So, and the significance of gaps, when you're looking at the width of the gap is certain times very important, like, certain times we found that about 10 species were not able to move between the Palagat gap, the north and south of Palagat gap. And as we look at the gap is very narrow between the Nilgiris and in the Wayanad. We have only one species. That means that Banasuda chelapan has, or the Montesingla between split only two, in the Nilgiris and in Wayanad. So that's very interesting. So the significance of gap and how wide is the gap and how narrow is the gap is also an indicator like that can also influence the speciation events in that. Yeah, these are the groups that we studied from Sholicola. That's a new name, but it was short wing. And interestingly, the whole study has, sent one short wing from the entire history of our bird list, and we don't have any short wing no more. And we have, interestingly, this turned out to be a flycatcher. So that's also an interesting thing. So the perspective of understanding birds change over a period of time, based on the methodology that we approach for science. Earlier it was morphology based, now it is genetics and genomics, so you understand the species in a different perspective. Like, okay, now it's a Sholicola, now it's a flycatcher. I don't know what will turn out in after some time. So things are changing according with the methodologies we adopt for. This is the same with many other scientific sector also. What I want to say that certain species are able to cross the valleys, certain species are not able to cross the valleys. And I found that the black and orange flycatcher has been found at about 850 meters in Silent Valley. So I still have the genetic connectivity of between the two mountain ranges. So species may move, depends on the climatic conditions and the habitat conditions of favor between these two. Yeah, I already talked about this. There are certain species which we found out, like out of 24 species we studied, about 10 were affected by valleys. So deep valleys have more impact on speciation events. Narrow valleys have less impact. It can create one or two species across time. Yes. So from this we found, like when we look at the babblers species, especially now we call the Montesingla group as diverged into 4 different species. One is on the Vanasuda chelapan in this year, and the Nilgiri chelapan, and also the Palni and the Ashambu. So there are 4 different species as of now that has been described, and this was done in 2017. And we're looking at Sholicola. We have 3 species identified. One is still a kind of, there is not much morphological difference on the Ashambu Sholicola. But if somebody go there and see, okay, we can identify that this is Ashambu chelapan. But it's important that we recognize the Ashambu chelapan, because for the conservation and protection of that habitat to be there for a long time, we have the species. So when you talk about bird festival in one side, it's not for us, but it's for the birds. So connecting the species into an ecosystem is very, very important, like where it lives, and that is an icon that we can also protect the habitat. So we do a lot of research, but the problem is like how best we translate that research into action. If I described a genus of Banasuda chelapan, I'm sitting at home, not looking at the landscape that is mountain, the Camelham mountain, what is happening into that mountain range is very important. So how do we act on that? So that is also very important. So for that action, we need I'm going a little bit deviation from my topic, but I really wanted to say my focus on that It's not on research, but go beyond research, what we can do to protect the species, and the species has to be there because it's a human-induced kind of a climate change system that we are creating now. It's our responsibility to look at the habitat, how species are being protected in that area. So that is very important. So the species, to recognize the species in a different mountain tops gives more value to that habitat to be protected over a period of time. This is the Sholicola. Yeah, now everyone knows about it. This is the Nilgiri Chilapan. Now, after this work, there are multiple things that's happened in Robin's lab, but unfortunately, I had to come back to Wayanad in 2017. I am completely caught up with the Hume Center, and my bird work and interests has somehow I had to reduce a bit gradually, and now I am fully concentrating on the climate side. But still, when that time we had decided to look at the larger biogeographical, units, which can bring in more number of, maybe species which need conservation attention. For example, when you're looking at, when we sampled in, Pankaj is here, we sampled in Chhattisgarh, and we sampled in between many of the northern Karnataka and Maharashtra, and looking at the pattern of jungle babbler. So the jungle babbler that we see in Western Ghats, the southern Western Ghats, is not the one that we see in the northern Karnataka or in the Maharashtra and that side. I think Naman is working on that. I want his presentation here, but unfortunately, maybe next year we can bring in how the northern Western Ghats gaps are impacting on the species. And I think during Salim Ali's time, Salim Ali has Ripley, and actually they looked at more into the subspecies level. No, they looking at, because they worked on museum specimens, they could easily see the difference between the species, and some of these differences are very significant for a species. When you're looking at larger survival of the species, it is important that we have a very good, source population that can withstand all the climatic or environmental threats, so that the species will survive over a period of time. And as we see from our own, observation in this part of the Wayanad, we see that smaller islands with a smaller population is likely to have a fast extinction compared to the larger population. In that case, it is important to look at the larger population and those habitats are to be protected. So looking at India biogeography as a major thing, we have multiple barriers that are coming in rivers that has been in the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats and Central India. You have multiple biogeographic units coming up, and they are limiting species for movements up and down. And there are variations within the population itself that can be classified as either as a new species, or you can also looking at a species of significance. I would say a species of significance or as a population of significance in that particular area when we have to looking for from the conservation angle. So the study of biogeography, we need to look more and more efforts in India, looking at more deeper understanding and looking at multiple zones in India. Like India has multiple biogeographic zones, whether it's Himalayas, Northeast India, or in the Indian subcontinent, or in the Western Ghats. We can find out more and more, species or other organisms to look upon. Not only limited to birds, but looking for other taxa also. Coming to Wayanad, after this work, we moved a little bit more into focusing on Wayanad, because we are settling in Wayanad, okay, what to do on birds, and not looking beyond the climate thing. So we identified this, within Wayanad there is a microgeography, maybe called the microbiogeography, where you have different islands. For example, in this map you see the bottom larger section is the Camelham Mountains. And if you go further left, you will see the Kurchermala. It's about 1,500 meters mountain. And the next is the Banasura peak that goes about 2,050 meters in elevation. If you go to the northern side, you will see the Brahmagiri. So within this smaller geography, you see smaller islands. So this is what we're trying to look at, like a microbiogeography of a region where this population, for example, if you're looking at the Banasura Chelapan, its distribution. So these are the 4 islands that we see within Wayanad, which are very significant for the, maybe we'd say conservation of the species, especially the endemic species or the critically endangered species. The Camelham Mountain, the Kurchermala, the Banasura, and the Brahmagiris. So the Banasura Chelapan is now confined into three mountains. For example, in the Kamalham mountain, we have the largest population, but we don't see them in the Kurcharmala because the elevation is almost 1,500. Even though there are Shola grassland, I think uh, maybe in the past there would have some population survived in that area, but now it is completely gone case because the lower part completely has been removed. Only a very small segment of Shola grass, and that is also not a true kind of a Shola system. But you have the physical features of a Shola and certain representative species of plants are there. But if you go to Banasura mountain, you have a small segment, about maybe around less than 10 square kilometer area on the peak that we can see as a primary habitat of Banasura Chelapan. If you go to the Brahmagiris in the north, we have very few numbers. Maybe we do repeated surveys every year, but maybe once in a while only we find the Banasura Chelapan there. There the elevation is about 1,200 to 1,300 meters. But most of the birds are concentrated on the Camelham mountain. So that is why important that we have to look at this dynamics of smaller island system in this geography. And with recent studies we looking at the theory of island biogeography generally say the area species relationship, like you have more larger area, you can hold up more number of diversity and more number of species there. And here we're looking like how Camelham mountains have the higher number of species diversity as well as the very high population density of Banasura Chelpan. And we go into the Kurcharmala, Banasura mountain, we have more number. Then second is in the Banasura and in the Kurcharmala and some population. So the Manikundamala that we see from here to looking at that side, you will see the mountain complex there. It's about 1,500 meters, but we cannot find any Banasura Chelapan or many other black and orange, nothing is there. But it still have a high density of high diversity of species. Maybe an effect of which is that this mountain range is close to the Camelham, which is like a 10-kilometer distance from the mountain. So as we move from the source, like the Camelham, into the Brahmagiris, so the diversity is coming down. So this actually help us to understand how biogeography works, how the theory of island biogeography works in a terrestrial ecosystem in which we're looking at the sky islands as a integral part. So this work in progress. So and now we started looking at the current climate change, how certain species are being impacted by the current changes in. So we did we tried to collect rainfall data from Wayanad by gridding into 25 square kilometers for the last 7 years. Every grid we have weather stations now, and people are collecting rainfall data and polling to a climate lab. So based on that, we have prepared a gridded rainfall zone within Wayanad, which gives a pattern like which are the wetter zones in Wayanad and which are the drier zones in Wayanad. So the light color shows like the area receive about 500 to 1,500 millimeters of rainfall, and red color shows like about 4,000 to 6,000 millimeters of rainfall in a year. And this year it crossed about 7,000 millimeters. So I see a clear change of precipitation since 2018 in Wayanad or in the northern Kerala, where we all data shows like is going beyond the maybe a decadal average. If you're looking at the data from 2017, Wayanad was facing about 50% deficit rainfall. It's about 3,500 millimeters was, and it was about 50,000 deficit. Now it's like a normal and above normal. So the Lakdi region of Wayanad, which received within that last 2 monsoon, consecutive monsoon, we got around 15,000 millimeters of rainfall in total. Like means that has a tremendous impact on the ecosystem. Like it's going to change. Like we have more number of rainy days coming up. So these are the changes that is happening in the landscape, and we are trying to look at like how birds are going to impact this. So what we are trying is, in addition, we have the excess CO2 in the atmosphere. Like the Wayanad has already shows a warming up of about 1.4 degree. When you're talking about the global climate change that we had set about 1.5 degree in 2015, We already have established warming at 1.5, 1.3, 1.4. So we can imagine like what is the kind of impact on the ecosystem that we are going to see over a period of time. So there will be changes in insects and other life which can produce more because of the high humidity and those things like that. And extra carbon dioxide can eventually support more plant growth in this area. So you will see now you go to the Brahmagiris and all that, you can see the trees are moving into the grasslands. Earlier the boundaries of sholas were very much confined with the Kurni around the sholas. Now if you walk around the Brahmagiris now after 25 years I walk on the mountain, I see that trees are gradually establishing into the grasslands, into a good part of the lands, grasslands will be covered by trees in future. So this is going to happen in some of these sections. So the Shola grassland complex that we see now, I don't know how that is going to turn around in coming years. Even in Silent Valley, some of these, but that was a secondary, forest, but on the lower elevation. But on the Brahmagiris are not like that. Brahmagiris are actually a climax solar grassland ecosystem that is existing for a long time. So these changes are happening at one side, and certain species that are indicator that we're looking at now also moving. Our preliminary data shows like this Tickles blue, which was not very prominent in some parts of Wayanad, now moving from the drier part into the wetter part. When we say wetter part in terms of precipitation, at the same time there is an increase of temperature of 1.5 degrees in this area. So this system is working at two levels. One side you have a high precipitation coming in, on the other side you have also have a temperature increase. So how the species are interacting with changes in the ecosystem or in the atmospheric changes. So for example, the temperature and climatic changes, how these are impacting. So we are just trying to looking at it. Now we launched a long-term bird monitoring program by taking data from all these grids on a regular basis, so that we will get a much more clear picture of how the species respond into the climatic changes in our park. And I just want to show the impact of other impacts of extreme climate. These are the habitat of the Banasura Chelapan. So you will see that 2018 and 2019, cloudburst actually have taken away much of this habitat into the Chaliar River. So the mountains are already steep about, almost 80-90 degree vertical. And within 20 to 24 to 48 hours, we've been receiving about 500-700 millimeters of rainfall. So none of these mountains can actually, hold those kind of precipitation. It will definitely wash out the habitat. So you can see that like bare rocks are coming up in many parts of Camelha Mountain. And that is another threat the species are going to face in future. So I am very much concerned about how the climate change is going to impact the species. I don't know whether these species will survive in future, or will there be any kind of isolation between them. For example, the recent landslides in Mundakai, which has washed away about 200 hectares of land in the whole mountain range, making them as a bare rock patch in between. So that means again you are getting a barrier for the species to move in and out and all that. So these changes are happening in the landscape. It is important to look at that to understand how the species are being impacted with the current climate change that is induced by human beings. So in summary, we would say paleoclimate influence on speciation in Western Ghats. Okay, now we have the 4 different, 2 genera and 7 species that coming up on one side. And the new climate change that started impacting on the ecosystems, and we do not know how it is going to impact the species, that we need more studies are required, more focused studies are required. It's also requires some physiological studies. That's why I just want, Ansha, you should come here and to look at that how birds are responding, how the physiological response of the species into a changing climatic condition is very, very important. How best. So maybe after the presentations, we'll see all this. I think your work on that is very, very significant in that case. And our preliminary data indicates species response to changes in precipitation temperatures are already happening. And we need to look for a very systematic approaches to understand how these changes are impacting the species. So these are just generally, I would like to talk about, in summary about that. The research never ends, and we have to look for more elements in detail so that we come up with more and more ideas. But after all this research and action should lead to something on the ground. Until we don't do that, I think the research will remain, but the species will not remain. So now this become an endangered species. That's another thing. Now we cannot do much research on that. That's another challenge that we are. As a scientist, that we are facing the second level of challenges that, okay, for maybe some 15 years before, nobody was concerned about the species. Maybe the research has brought the species as an independent identity, and now this became endangered. But further research is limited because of the scientific protocol, all the conservation protocols of the. So that again, it's a policy question. Like we need to continue working on the landscape again. So that is something that I want to put in black and white on the table, in front of the chair also. Yeah. With that, I conclude. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. That was the presentation by Vishnu Das. So from that larger biogeographical realms, we have come down to southern Western Ghats actually. Not the entire Western Ghats, we were speaking about southern Western Ghats, I mean south to Nilgiris. Okay, so what is happening? Especially putting those two species together. One is the Chilapan, that is the laughing thrush, and the other one a shortwing. Still I would like to call it as a shortwing. Nilgiri blue robin, and there is another in the Anamalays. Formerly, we consider it as a single species. One is the Nilgiri blue robin, we call it. Then in the Anamalays, we have the shortwing. Now, they have rewritten everything. All the list we will have to write again. And it is entirely different genus. That was the work they have done. Okay. So, now we can start asking questions also. Maybe some 10-15 minutes we can spend this, and there are many veteran people sitting among the audience, so they may be having many questions. And yes, Praveen is there, because I remember, Praveen, when we had a survey here, you preferred Banasura. You went there especially to see Banasura laughing thrush, and you were very happy while coming back, and you were narrating the stories. Yes, we were hearing that. Praveen is there, and yes. Now the presentation is open for discussion.
Vishnu, just one point, one clarification. You said about the increasing temperature by 1.5 degrees, and you also shown the rainfall gradient from 500 to 6 to 8,000. Do we have any historical data on the rainfall and the temperature to compare?
Yeah. The temperature increase is about 40 years of data from the Regional Agriculture Research Station in Wayanad. They got 40 years of temperature data in Wayanad. And the rainfall data, we have about 80 years of rainfall data from Wayanad right now. So we can look at different decades. That's how I could talk about the decadal average till 2017 was about showing like a 53% deficient. Now like looking post 2018, it's coming like a normal, and so for the IMD standard, it's coming up a normal and above normal things. So we still have a good data set in Wayanad at least, because there was the plantation community here, which was largely split across the landscape in different regions. They have the historic data set with this, and we have compiled everything. In my own house, I have 70 years of data. My father is doing it.
British had already established the coffee plantations in 1830s. Yes. That's what I remember. So actually they have a habit that they will first install a rain gauge and a thermometer. So
yes,
was data available during the 1830s and 40s here?
That's
especially in the Manandawadi side.
Yes, yes. We have the data of William Logan talking about 1884 landslide in Tamarisheri Ghat that taken away about 2 lakh metric tons of soil down the valley into the Adivaram. And the very first road was built through along the stream, and they understood that if you build on the stream, it will comes down into the valley, and that showing like a 7,500 millimeter recorded rainfall. Plus, they say that the vessel was overflowed. We do not know exactly what happened on that particular date in 1883 or 84. So, I think that's another interesting point, that there is not climate change at that time. So something is working, like maybe some kind of cyclone or something would have worked at that time. But still it has a history of heavy precipitation in this part.
No, recently what happened, 2019, Putumala and Kalapara. Because there was that rain was actually measured in avalanche. Avalanche is just on the upper side of Nilambur and Wayanad. There, August 6, in that rain gauge, it was 40 centimeter. August 7th, 2019, I mean mentioning, it was 80 centimeter. August 8th, it was 91.1 centimeter. Just think about it. It is more than 250 centimeter or 2,500 millimeters in 3 days. Our annual average rainfall is 3,000 millimeters per annum. That has fell down in 3 days. That was what happened. Then within a span of 2 hours, about 5 o'clock or in the evening, we had Kavalapara, 58 people gone. Then maybe around 7 o'clock, we had Puttumala also, equidistant from avalanche. So maybe this has some measures, 57 centimeters. That was the rainfall in Puttumala. And Nilambur was having that sort of rain gauge, and still they said that it was more than 50 centimeters rain in a single day. So that's what has happened. So the same thing can be repeated because it is quite unpredictable. When it was there in Mumbai, 2005, July 25, 94 centimeters a single day. We never imagined that they were telling that it may be happening towards the northern part only, the cyclonic effect. That will not be there in south. That has gone. Now 91 we are also getting in a single day. So anything can happen any day. So now it is high. Next year it may not be like that. It can be a deficient rain. So that is climate change actually. So how it will be impacting? I have read somewhere that if it is 1 degree up, the animals or the flora and fauna will have to move another 250 meters up for the same kind of climate or the climate they need. That niche will be changed. So how far they can go? We have a limit, 2,695 meters they can go, Anamudi. And here it will be Vellaimala, 2,365 meters they can move. Beyond where they will go. So there is a limit if it is like that, if it's going on like that. Okay, so that is what I heard. Okay, then.
A small announcement to make. We have a Kilipecha session right now starting at 11 a.m. at Bale Sushika. It's on bird in culture, bird and nature in the language. So it is about to start. So those who are interested in that. It will be led by Mr. Dr. Vipin Das, scientist of MSSRF, MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. Bale Sushika, it's down, yeah. Bale Sushika, incidentally, it meets Spider Hunter, yeah, there in the entrance. Thank you.
Okay, you better to remain here. More important papers are to come. Okay, page we can have page later also. Kili page. Page will go on like that. Okay, this is not page. Page is in simple terms, just a page. But this is very serious. Page is some, this is not just a page, which is much beyond that. So better to remain here. Those who want to page, they can go. Okay. So any more questions? Sachet, some Praveenji, your an interaction with Banasura for the first day. So is there any another mic? Okay.
Not necessarily on Banasura, something to think about. Wayanad also has got some of the peninsular elements coming all the way to the eastern Wayanad. What is happening to those elements also need to be studied. Most likely they are getting pushed out because of the higher rainfall. The areas are getting more greener and those species and subspecies may be getting changed. So while concentrating on the mountains, please also have some kind of concentrating on the edges of Wayanad, which is near to the Karnataka.
Yes. That's very important. Like we already have some preliminary information coming up. Like the eastern side is getting more rainfall in recent times. Last 3 years data shows like more rainfall in eastern side. But maybe you have to wait for maybe some 4-5 years. If there is a continuous thing, then we will have impacts on the species. Yes.
Vishnu, here, Munnar we have, because they had installed a rain gauge to some 100 years back itself. Immediately after they started this Kanandevan Hill producing company. And after that, till they keep the data, Now automated machines are also there. And I don't know how many of you have read that MS Swaminathan report on Munnar. He clearly says that there is a difference of 2 degrees centigrade in Munnar region. It has gone up from the 100 years data. Okay. So then another thing, there is a pattern from west to east. So here also it will be like that. Lekadi, he was mentioning about 15,000 millimeter means it is the, what is it, our Assam, Chirapunji rain on those days, not now. 15 to 20,000 millimeter even they used to get. 10 to 12 is the average rainfall, 20,000 the maximum rainfall they got there. So similar we had in Lekadi also. So from west to east there will be a pattern, you know. If you move from Lekadi to Pulpalli, there will be a gradual change. So such pattern you have studied or you have? You have how many installation now?
Right now, about 250 stations.
250 stations they have already installed and they will be generating data. Okay. So that pattern is there from west to east. Okay. Then.
So that question.
Yes, please. Oh, David, UK. Please.
Sir, good morning to you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I am Krish from MIT, Pune, sir. Thank you for a wonderful session. Sir, my question goes to the slide where it refers to the cloudburst and where the mountains, the rocky part was more exposed. And as sir rightly said, you know, the species are being pushed more and more to a higher region when there is a limit out over there. So there is a stress factor. So the stress factor, I would just want to know, has it been recorded or has there been any study which has been taken place wherein we are actually looking into the stress factor? Is it towards the isolation or to an adaptation actually right now? Because we are only talking about isolation. We are fearing they'll get extinct. You know, after a certain limit, they will cease to exist. But the right opening slide where we had a Darwin finches and the example of the Galapagos, yes. I think we should also look into the adaptation part. Is there anything, sir? Thank you,
Right now, nothing. No one has looked into it. It's good to look at stress levels. That's why I would say like how physiological changes are there. And adaptation might work in the case of Galapagos, where the Peter and Rosemary Grant looked at like a 40 years of studies on the finches that come out with a hybridization has gone into a species. And that's an interesting thing. But that means that we have to continuously work in that landscape, monitoring species. And they worked on a, you know, very regular, strict, systematic way. They found that all the birds in that habitat and started looking at the patterns and all that, came out with a wonderful understanding that it can climate change, changes in the precipitation or temperature can bring in speciation either in the form of a hybridization, but that become an established species in later period of time. So that is possible, but we are not started anything like that. But it's good to see how the species are responding because there are multiple factors working in the landscape. One is the temperature, one is the extremely high precipitation. Second is the land use change, and that's already happening. So these are the elements to work on future. Like people are interested, we can come here and do. We'll have all facilities coming up. Thank you.
One more question only. No, we will have to go to the next talk. You want to? Okay.
I'm Nisar. I'm also a native of. I'm Colonel Nisar, ex-army person, retired in 2016 and then settled down in Wayanad. I'm on the other axis, Manandavadi Kuttiyadi route. I'm just below the Makkiyad Meenmutti waterfalls. So in the 9 years plus, 9.5 years to be precise, I've seen the number of cutting, number of filling, number of houses, number of resorts coming there. It's very alarming. Now it is directly proportional to our population. So we can't stop growth and progress. So what is the option? We have so much of data which is very alarming. But what is the way forward? How do we go about it? Because data won't serve any purpose. But what are the action plan we are going to save this wonderful country? Thank you.
Should I answer?
Yes. We'll have to. Sir.
Yeah, the bird festival is a significant step to that direction. That's why people are here. Looking at the landscape which we worked on Camelham, I personally started looking my childhood, looking at the species, and we've been climbing up the mountain for a long time. And gradually things are changing. I mean, maybe since 2000 onwards, we have a lot of settlements coming up, tourism coming in large scale, getting into the mountains a lot. Now everybody is facing the other side. Like, extreme precipitation is taking up life and livelihoods back into the soil. So the strategy should be to protect the existing, the mountains as it is, because it's not only for birds, it's for the life, livelihood, rivers, water, everything. So we should have a very clear, policy for that, with the action taking when the political will. So that's very important. So yesterday we are here. One is the department people are here, and the other side politicians are here. We have to influence them. They are the decision makers. So we need to assemble in large numbers that people say, okay, this is a group who was working concerned about birds and their ecosystem. Then only it will work. Otherwise, single persons cannot do much about that. But as a collective strength, and that's what I see here in this festival, like a lot of people turn around from across the India talking about birds. That means we have a strong force that can advocate some kind of protective status into the fragile ecosystems of Western Ghats. That's the way ahead. So everybody, in that case, everybody has to work together.
Yeah. Okay, Vishnu.
Thank
So
you.
there is no one-word answer for your question. It is happening everywhere. Globally, it is happening. So that is why we all are here. We will have to influence the decision makers, and we will have to force them that this is not the way. Still, we don't have a land policy, land use policy. We don't have. Wherever you want to make a resort or whatever, you can. That is the thing. It should not be like that. We know. It should not be like that, but we will have to work together. That is why we have gathered here. So you will have to go ahead. Okay, so this is the last question. If somebody want to, yes, that can be the last then. So Prabha, please give a mic.
I was very struck, Vishnu, by that the ecotones are changing, right? So we had done a study long ago in Mukurti National Park, and one of the first observations I made was that the edge of the sholas were become furry with the movement of species. But I think there's a broader trend, which is that the vegetation types are changing, right? So it's not just that species are moving north or moving up, that is that the entire type of vegetation is changing. This is from our work in plant conservation, and that woodlands are forming. And also like the drawdown and overshoot of, say, irrigation means that there's more surface water, and so it means that there's more tree growth is possible. So that all these shola grasslands, drier areas, low rainfall areas, or the open areas, that is going to get taken over by possibly by a woodier vegetation, which also includes a response to over-carbonification and over-nitrification of the landscape. You and I have talked about that. So I was just wondering, we are seeing plant life forms change. Would you be seeing like the types of bird communities change? That's just a question I had.
Yeah, it's changing. The indicators are there, like, the composition is changing, community is slowly changing into this. This is what we see in the Brahmagiris also. I was talking about that, how Brahmagiri grasslands has been turning slowly into woodlands. So these are, I think Jobin have something to say about this. Actually, we put in such a way that he can bring about those dynamics in this presentation later. I think that's, thank you.
We can have more questions after the three of them completing the presentation. We will, if time permits, we will continue the discussion. So, thank you, Vishnu, for the wonderful presentation and from his own experience. And now I invite Now we have the second presentation by Pankaj Gopade. Yeah, the title given is Does the Past Last? Influence of Quaternary Climatic Fluctuations on the Geographical Distribution of Owlets of India. He was actually concentrating on one particular group of birds, owlets. Okay. And how the historical climate change shaped the geographical distribution of four closely related owlet species. That is what he is going to stress, and he will explain everything in that. Dr. Pankaj Kopade, when I heard about his name, I was expecting a very elderly man. But when I met him this morning, I can call him a young boy. Yes, there is still future for ornithology in India. when I am seeing all these young people, I am very happy. Okay. So Pankaj Kopade is an evolutionary ecologist and assistant professor of the Department of Environmental Studies, MIT WPU. You explain me, WPU means World Peace University. Okay, in Pune. His research focused on owls, dragonflies, exploring themes of evolutionary ecology, urban ecology, and biogeography. Okay, great diversity in the subjects and topics. He leads citizen science initiatives, Dragonfly South Asia and Owl India, and has been recognized as a DST Young Scientist. Yes, you will be surely deserving it. And SAVUS, SAEVUS. What it is, I don't know. He will explain it. And rising star of conservation and Earth Watch fellow, TEDx speaker, and IUCN Red List reviewer. His works include discovery of new damselfly species also. So, an enthusiast in birds and also in dragonflies. Great. We are expecting a very good presentation from you. So, welcome, Kopade. So you can take about 30 minutes, then the question.
Hello, am I audible? Till the last bench, last chair, okay. Okay, so thanks a lot, Vishnu Das ji, for setting up such a background, such a nice background about evolution of birds in the Western Ghats. It makes my life, my work very easy. So I can just focus on owls. And thanks a lot organizers for having an owl in the logo, because we are always neglected and we always feel that we are sidelined, and that's why we are active only at 9 times. And even yesterday, Dr. Ashwin also mentioned that eBird has a lot of gaps because people don't record nocturnal birds. So that actually gives me a lot of scope, to work on birds which people don't recognize much, don't connect with much. So my topic is just going to be on owls, and let's listen to owls, as we go ahead. So when Vishnu came in touch with me and he said that, can you come as a speaker, can you give a talk? I said, yeah, I have a paper ready. And the title is also ready. It's called as Quaternary Climatic Fluctuations and How It Impacted the Owlets of India. Yesterday,